Oh wow, we're back with another legendary Pokemon video. Who aren't actually legendary. Like, they're at least close enough. There's a lot of Pokemon that have that close to legendary feeling emanating from how they're presented and shown off when fans happen to run into any form of new media that they've managed to fit Pokemon into this time, and find these Pokemon that branch out from the pack. These are 10 Pokemon that are presented differently that if there were no guides, Google, or anything to say whether they were or were not, they would be the most likely candidates to be seen as legendary Pokemon. Some have even felt so close to legendaries that I've made the mistake of thinking a Pokemon is legendary, when it's not, put it in a video, got way too many views, and I have to sit here and get a monthly reminder in the form of pop-up comment notifications how I'm not a true Pokemon fan. But this isn't just about harping on past things. I mean, it's not. Or the years upon years of thinking certain things were, when they were not. This is about those almost legendary Pokemon that fit in based on the ideas put into their creation, or superficially, but don't have the actual status of legendary Pokemon, and can either be mistaken as one, or just omits a design that makes us think it should be a legendary Pokemon, and not mythical, because those are just legendary Pokemon with microtransactions. Number 10, Sigilyph. Nothing says legendary quite like flying ancient artifacts into the desert. And with Sigilyph portraying that feeling of mystery and the unknown, as well as having a backstory such as it being the protector of an ancient city, it always felt like it could have its own legendary plotline in the Generation 5 games. Or at least be the summoner of one. One of the stories I happened to think of when seeing this Pokemon for the first time was it was linked to Unknown in the ruins. I mean, if you just rip its head off and stick an Unknown eye in there, well, that's just a perfect fit. Even Unknown felt like its own subcategory of legendary Pokemon. Weird Pokemon designed differently from the rest that doesn't evolve and flies around the area where you get an Arceus suspiciously. Sigilyph does match that sort of feeling, and even comes off as both one to fly around something like an Arceus being summoned as it plays its Google images, or one that would be summoned after Unknowns flew around it. Sigilyph's mythic design and mysterious radiance gave it a nice aura of depth as one of the Pokemon to consider for this category. It always seemed like a Pokemon in Generation 5 that had some plot devices attached to it, as well as being one of the more out there looking flying types. Number 9, Carbink. There's a lot of these rare looking non-evolving singular Pokemon that stick out in each generation's Pokedex. This one just happens to be a jewel of its own. Carbink always shot out as one of the Pokemon in Generation 6 that looked like it had ties to a legendary Pokemon. Or mythical. Or at least more of a story to this rocky gem. And then close enough where Diancie came out and turns out Diancie is also a jewel Pokemon that originates from a sudden transformation of Carbink. It's cool to see these little Pokemon that don't need to evolve and just stand out feeling special on their own, that get pointed out as a possible prodigy student, and turns out their sibling is a mythical Pokemon. You've got Unknown from Gen 2, Carbink from Gen 6, and Ditto from number 8. Okay, it's actually number 8, but it almost was. But with even Ditto's existence and diary notes alluding to legendary Pokemon, it seems sufficient enough to combine these two into one section due to Carbink and Ditto having some bonded ties to legendaries. Do you know how close Ditto was to being a legendary Pokemon? If the scientist just didn't drop a chromosome or like a vial, any one of those Dittos could have been Mewtwo instead. And even though Ditto can transform into any legendary Pokemon, I'm not going to be stretching out my reasons for this list on technicalities. It's more about how well Ditto and Carbink both fit into number 9 of being close to a legendary Pokemon, with their intricate roots connecting them to legendary Pokemon, and almost being their own version of a singular Reggie to Regigigas, or a Mew to Mewtwo, even though Mew is mythical. Although with there being a choice between an experimental little blob of gloop compared to a high-priced floating jewel to be unlocked, the diamond in the rough of non-legendaries took the whole section for itself. Number 8, Spiritomb. Spiritomb was a bit of a 50-50 on whether or not it was thought to be legendary. With its interesting design and overly elongated side quests you need to go through, there were some questions. Some people thought it might be, and it definitely could have fit in as one. I mean, Generation 4 was really shelling out spots for anyone to be a hidden legendary, with the last half of the Pokedex just being reserved for old generation evolutions and legendaries. Do I really have to say mythical again? Can I just lump them all in together as legendaries? You guys had me scared every time I referred to this. Spiritomb was pretty close though. We have this tiny little mongrel like Heatran just lighting up and dwelling in some cave, and then Spiritomb comes along with its own little specialty item and side quest where you have to go talk to 32 people in the underground. Eventually you can come to the conclusion it might be in some special species of Pokemon. Having a spectral spirit that emits from a special rock with its own location in the Hollow Tower did give it a head start to run for the legendary title. And for most of us, the fact that you had to go speak to 32 different people might have led us to believe you could get only one for the tower because you weren't doing that more than once. But no, you could get multiple. It at the very least was one of those special Pokemon to pop up in a generation that would need its own little encounter spot like it fiddly had in Oras, with only one in Sea Mauville, and also seems like a Pokemon that could be given a part of the plot. Number 7. Absol. When you hear disaster Pokemon, you think, oh, it's a disaster this Pokemon isn't a legendary, but also that it might have some cool Pokefacts or its own unique story. Well, not really. It does show up to warn people about the upcoming disasters it senses, but did it come to warn us about Sword and Shield? No, it wasn't even in the decks. Absol always felt like one of those rare Pokemon that had more story to it than other Pokemon this generation, and would have a nice place in the anime, or a starring role in the movies where it's linked to other legendaries. It did have a more special appearance than Jirachi Wishmaker, so that feeling of standing out in the Gen 3 decks compared to other Pokemon wasn't lost. It does get some extra additives with it always being placed in special locations within each game it's in, where disasters happened, even on Pokemon Box, where it's the only non-legendary Pokemon on the cover. It was even picked out as one of the few Pokemon to gain a Mega Evolution that wasn't from Gen 1. And with its majestic wings and angelic look, it definitely has a lot going for it to be within that realm of almost legendary. Number 6. Arcanine. I'm not going to go into the fact that its species is the legendary Pokemon, and stretch out my reasoning that that's why it's very close to being a legendary Pokemon, while being a legendary Pokemon, without it being a legendary Pokemon. But even though its status is not legendary, it is a legendary. Arcanine has had a special place in my heart as my favorite Pokemon, and while I don't need it to be a legendary Pokemon to maintain that status, it has little pop-ups here and there from its origin, to even engravings in the anime hinting at it almost having the status. In episode 2. Or at least being considered for one, that makes it a notable Pokemon for the consideration of should be a legendary Pokemon. While it doesn't have its own quest, it does manage to pop up a lot of times as a signature Pokemon, and having its origins based off of mythical creatures and cultural artifacts. A lot of extra consideration was put into Arcanine's overall character, and it's always one of the Generation 1 Pokemon to stand out and be used for many situations that make it more notable. One that also didn't need a Mega Evolution, or another evolution, or a form swap, or a Gigantamax. Number 5. Lapras. Generation 1 always had these special Pokemon with little nuances that you think could have more to them than just being another Pokemon to catch. Maybe they had a special location you could unlock like they were an early Relicanth, or maybe you could convince one of your friends it was actually a legendary Pokemon just because of how it looked, or that it felt different from the rest of the Pokemon and you specifically needed to surf with it in some left-right, up, left, down, right pattern to unlock Mew from under the truck so you could trade it to them for their Lunchables before they got to Silph Co. Lapras had that feeling with it not evolving and staying as its own signature creature, as well as having things like only being given to you as a gift by a rival, or its own little pop-up sprite location for you to interact with in Union Cave. I always thought it could be one of the boys just hanging out, flashing its status around, and getting VIP treatment, even over other Gen 1 Pokemon. Lapras did contain the legendary feeling with how it was presented in the games, and even had more of that trance you might have felt when you encountered a red Gyarados in the sea thinking it was a legendary form, or that Lapras' sprite you encountered was also red compared to the blue one when you used Surf. The little added-on specialties given to Lapras gave it a legendary feeling in the early gens and always made it feel like a more special Pokemon. Number 4. Zoroark. You know every generation always has this one Pokemon that sticks out like they're trying to make a new poster Pokemon of the generation. Well, Zoroark comes in to take the torch as that Pokemon. You've got Zoroark and Zorua being the first Generation 5 Pokemon to be revealed, a special ability that adds on to its more in-depth backstory, where yes, it can pretend to be an actual legendary Pokemon as well, and even being on the title and the main Pokemon in a Pokemon movie. It was definitely one of those Pokemon mistaken for at least mythical, with it having its own event to be caught that even needs one of the legendary beasts to unlock. It had that sort of not legendary but graded above the rest feeling, like a rare meat you pay extra for. Sort of like it was the Generation 5 Lucario, where you all know how people feel about Lucario, which is great because Lucario is number 3. Number 3, Lucario. Lucario got its own movie too, and a character that looks a lot like it, who could also possibly be a Lucario. Could even be a Zoroark in disguise. You don't know. Riley might just be a Pokemon, who just waits near or inside a cave for the main character. Oh, that's right, a legendary Pokemon. And regular Pokemon. And trainers, side characters, Zubats, items. Lucario and Zoroark mesh well together to have that added on, almost legendary status, along with the notable Pokemon of the generation feeling I've been mentioning so much. You've got this categorizing of Pokemon Generation 4, where on the left we have all the starter Pokemon, then the common Pokemon, then the slightly less common Pokemon, then the evolutions of previous generation Pokemon, then those Pokemon that stick out because they don't evolve, maybe pseudo-legendaries here, and the Lucario in its own category here, like a unique storyline Pokemon, and then mythical Pokemon with their events, and then the legendary Pokemon. All between two berms. So pretty much this is the gradient of Pokemon you get, where Lucario is between two borderline categories of legendary Pokemon, and made to be popular enough to be considered as maybe it's one, with slightly more Google search results for this legendary Pokemon than the rest. Also, Lopunny somehow ends up in its own category between Lucario and the pseudo-legendary Pokemon. Don't ask me why, I don't want to put it here, it just is. The two plot-driven bipedals of Generation 4 and Generation 5 have that same feeling that can be interchangeable in spots, with maybe Zoroark having a bit more nuanced integration to match the legendary feel with its transforming abilities, and Lucario more on the notable, oh here's 2 different side quests and 2 different games, and your own personalized Lucario cosplayer. Number 2, Rotom. Just because a Pokemon is unique compared to the rest of the Pokedex in a generation has its own side quest where you can only catch one that comes out of a TV in a thematic haunted house and plays legendary Pokemon music doesn't make it a legendary Pokemon. Okay, well, but just because you made a video about legendary Pokemon and accidentally put it in when it wasn't actually a legendary Pokemon, and then YouTube removed annotations completely when you made one that explained you were wrong, and then the comments flooded back in, doesn't mean you have to make a whole new video and put it at number 2. Okay, a little harsh there, didn't need to call me out. I am not the only one that has accidentally mistaken this as a legendary Pokemon. I mean, when you get a Pokemon that only appears once in its own, and the legendary music starts playing, sometimes you forget to think, oh, maybe this isn't. But this list isn't just about Pokemon being mistaken for ones. Rotom being the only non-legendary Pokemon with the legendary music playing aside, it had a lot of different characteristics that just made it feel like a legendary Pokemon. Or at least mythical, I'm pretty sure I said mythical. And if I am not going to start this new decade with my first video being one you can all use as a reply to the people who made comments about Rotom on a video 4 years ago, with a link to this video, then we're just not starting off the decade correctly. With Rotom having the rare interaction of its own room with 5 different uninsured Maytag appliances it could combine into, it had a lot of unique attributes that were never seen before. I mean, who else had form changes at the time? Deoxys, Giratina, Shaman, Wormadam, all up there as legendary Pokemon. Wow, that sentence is gonna trigger something. Unknown sort of, I guess, too, but that's not really a form change, it's more of just the alphabet. The aspects Rotom brings for how it stands out from the rest really have it as another one of those Pokemon that's hard to graph, where it's a popular cult classic with many specializations in its creation, even without that Lucario and Zoroark feel. Even Pokemon Twitter accounts mistook it for a legendary Pokemon. I mean, it's only one, but let's analyze this tweet here instead of the actual Pokemon. Passive quotations over technically to emphasize, you know what, it kind of is. Words chosen to be used like not being legendary instead of isn't a legendary because it possibly should be. Deleted the tweet to make it again because even though it's another event that enough people mistake as a legendary event, the extra responses and quoted retweets are not worth reading and need to be reposted. So really what we're learning here is that my video matches the name of this Twitter. But again, removing the idea of me just being subliminally forced into a lull of continually mentioning Rotom being mistaken for one, let's summarize in bullet points the very close to legendary attributes it has that make it the number 2 almost legendary Pokemon. Standout non-evolving Pokemon that can come off as differently designed and with emphasis on unique characteristics. Dialga controls time, Palkia controls space, Rotom controls your electric bill. End Pokedex location right before all the other legendary Pokemon. Hidden with only one encounter in its own personalized location of a rundown mansion, probably still costing at least $3,000 a month in rent. Mystery gift of the secret key to open up the Rotom room in Platinum, when the only 2 other Pokemon to be given a mystery gift event were Mythicals. Multiple unique form changes that were rarely used before this generation, that are more than just aesthetic, and comparable to Deoxys. And altogether what this concoction brings is a cute little unique Pokemon of Generation 4 that touched the status of legendary, and was considered as one by me for years, because it all seemed to fit in and I never had any reason to question it because who was I ever going to mention that to and would correct me until I made that video. It's pretty close. Number 1. Volcarona. When Volcarona is in its own castle waiting for you to click on it at the end, at level 70, you think, oh, that's a legendary Pokemon. No, it's just a firebug. Volcarona does have that special feeling I've been constantly mentioning to it as a unique Pokemon you can encounter at the end while you skate through the Relic Castle and have it as a nice boss battle to encounter for you to catch. Encountering any Pokemon at level 70 is just a crazy moment to have and react to in a video by saying things like, no way, that's so sick, or are you serious? Are you serious? Yo, I never expected that. You just never know with these endgame Pokemon sometimes. With Volcarona hovering there in its own little cozy spot in between a bunch of urns, and in front of an engraved poster of itself, where I don't actually know how anyone got past it to draw that while it was right there, and it being in a castle, it really gets highlighted as one of the Pokemon that's about as legendary as non-legendary Pokemon can get. It even has one of the sages outside who is thinking about capturing it for Gethys. Bringing it more into the plot is a Pokemon considered for power and destruction. Its signature move of Fiery Dance is also special because it's learned at level 100, making it the only Pokemon that is neither mythical nor legendary to learn a move at level 100. All of those factors together really bring into the surrounding events you'd find for a legendary Pokemon, as well as its design and in-game stats admitting a legendary concept and can come off as one, even with little Larvesta existing and being given to you as an egg. Volcarona definitely looks like one of those Pokemon described as being surrounded by a bunch of dancing Sigilyph, and the whole event or quest you have to go on to catch one just makes it feel as special as catching any one of the legendary Pokemon.